Today is the first time I'm going to be headed to my new home casino, TCH Dallas. I have heard nothing but incredible things about that poker room and the action. I'm not sure what games I'm gonna jump in. I'm gonna have to check it out and see what they have available. So the plan is to go play some cash for a few hours and then of course jump in the nightly tournament because you know I love tournaments. So that's the plan. Let's get out there and play my first session at my new home casino. See you guys there. So I arrived at TCH Dallas and was immediately greeted by friendly staff. The room looks amazing and I'm super excited to get started and finally see what all this talk about TCH Dallas is about. There was already a game going, so I'm going to be playing the 2-5 match the stack. I was eyeing the stacks and I'm going to be in for 3,000 in this game. So as I was sitting down, I looked to my left and saw a familiar face, a face that you guys might know, Frankie from Next Gen Poker. He was at my table. I did get to meet him. He's a super nice guy and we plan to do some fun collabs in the future, so stay tuned for that. Alright, let's get into some hands. I folded for a decent amount of the time, trying to get a gauge for the table before early position raised to $20. The low jack made the call, and I looked down at the first semi-playable hand I've seen, which was King Jack offsuit. In general, this is just a fold, but I hadn't played many hands, and I think I can isolate this and hopefully win a pot heads up. I 3-bet to $75. Only the low jack calls, so we go heads up to a flop. The flop is Queen 8-9 Rainbow. Since we decided to 3-bet with King Jack offsuit, when he checks to us, we can't slow down at this point, plus we block the nuts and we're kind of at the bottom of our range here, just having King high. But the plus side is we do have position, so we're gonna have to start betting and hopefully get his smaller pairs to fold, as well as some of his backdoor draws and stuff like that. I make a bet of $110, he thinks for just a bit and then makes the fold, so I finally get to play a hand and we pick up our first pot here at TCH Dallas. In this hand, I look down at the beautiful ace-queen of spades under the gun and I raise to $20. The big blind, who just came back from a break, he makes the call, so we go heads up to a flop. The flop is 7-7-7. Pretty lucky. He checks, and I'm gonna go for a 33% sizing here. You don't have to bet big on these types of boards with your bluffs or your value hands because you want to give yourself a good price on your bluffs and you also want to keep worse hands in when you have nutted hands. So I make a bet of $15. He makes the call. His calls here are going to consist of pairs, can have a lot of nothing, can also have overcards like King Jack, King Queen, Jack 10, something like that where he wants to call and try to make a pair, so we head to a turn card. The turn is the 3 of clubs. He checks, and now I can bet here sometimes, but ace-queen is pretty good on this board, and I don't need to start bluffing with this hand a ton of the time, so I decide to check back and see what the river brings. The river is the jack of clubs. He checks it over to me, and now I don't have to turn my hand into a bluff. The jack isn't the greatest card. It is going to pair some of his overcard type hands, although I would expect him to bet the river a lot of the time if he did boat up. However, when I check, my opponent flips over pocket fours. If I was going to get him to fold that hand, I would have had to apply a lot of pressure, hopefully get him to fold by the river, but in this case, I was happy to show down my ace-queen high, and we'll move on to the next one. By the way, this table was not ideal in the sense that there seemed to be a lot of pros or semi-pros at my table, a lot of players that seemed to know what they were doing. In this hand, it folds to me on the button and I have Queen 4 suited. This is a perfectly fine open, however, the small blind folds and the big blind decides to 3-bet, but he did make it a pretty small sizing. He raised to $80. If my hand was slightly stronger, like Queen 8 suited, I would make the call here, but I didn't want to start deviating unless I had a good reason to. The big blind seemed like a very solid player, and I heard him talking, and he does play higher stakes, so he's definitely not going to make it easy on me. There wasn't a ton to talk about in this hand, but I did want to note that just because we raise the button and get 3-bet, it doesn't mean we should call with all of our hands. We should be selective and pick hands that play well post-flop, but the fact of the matter is we have a ton of better hands that we can call on the button with versus a big blind 3-bet. This hand, I'm finally getting my feet wet here at TCH Dallas. The hijack raises to $20. I look down at Jack 9 suited in the cutoff and I make the call. The big blind comes along as well, so we go 3 ways to a flop of Queen 8-7 with 1 spade. So we flop a gutter and a backdoor flush draw. The big blind checks and the original raiser bets $40. I make the call in position here, the big blind also calls, so we head to a turn which is the king of clubs. The big blind checks, the hijack bets $125. The king in theory is going to be pretty good for the pre-flop raiser. I debated raising, but I think I can still flat here because I have a lot of equity and I can consider bluffing river, so I decide to call the 125. The big blind finally gives up, so we're going heads up to a river, which is a very interesting card. It's an offsuit 9. The hijack thankfully checks. Because I don't know a ton about my opponents just yet, I'm gonna check, take my showdown value with my pair of 9s, and my opponent flips over ace 5 offsuit, so I flip over my pair of 9s and I take down a pretty nice pot. In this hand, there's a limp in early position. The cutoff raises to 30. I look down at ace-king offsuit in the small blind. I'm gonna raise it up and make it a bigger sizing since I'm out of position, and I raise to 125. The cutoff makes the call, so we go heads up to a flop of queen 6 deuce with 2 diamonds, no hearts unfortunately. On this queen high board and with my exact hand, I can either check or start betting, and I decide to go for a half pot size bet of $125. He makes the call. The turn is a 7 of clubs, no help to my exact hand. While ace-king high can be good here some of the time, I think I'm just gonna check and see what my opponent decides to do. I check it over to him and he doesn't want to check, he bets $180. I think I need to get pretty creative to win the hand at this point, so I decide to let it go and move on to the next hand. I folded again for quite a while, not picking up any hands or spots to play. I put on the $10 under the gun straddle, it folds round to the button, he raises to $60. The small and big blind fold, I look down at queen 9 off. Probably a fold for this size, but the button does seem pretty snug and someone that I think I can outplay post flop, so I make the call, planning on being a bit devious post flop. The flop is 8-5-3 with 2 spades. This is a pretty good flop for my range and not the best for his, if I'm assuming that he raises a tighter range than most from the button. I check it over to him and he bets $50. I do have the queen of spades in my hand and 2 overcards. It's not much, but it's queen high and I think it's enough to start bluffing here, although it's probably on the ambitious side. I make it $150. He quickly makes the call, which usually is a lot of weakness. If someone is really strong, they're going to think about their options before just deciding to call a bet really quickly, so we head to a turn card. The turn is a very interesting card. It's another 8. Again, this card definitely favors my hand more than his, as I can have a hand like ace-8 that I raise for value on the flop. I can put pressure on so many of his holdings, and now even his overpairs aren't going to love this board, if he happens to have them. So on the turn, I decide to bet $280, following through with my plan. He says that turn was a really bad card for me. He probably thinks I have an 8. He was like, I think you got there against me. He ends up making the fold, so I'm very happy to see that, and we take down a nice little pot here, bluffing with the good old queen high. Oh, Texas and their double board PLO bomb pots. I won't bore you with this one because we have a lot more interesting hands to go over, but I did make top full house on the top board and chop this pot with another player.
Alright, well, what a great first experience at this card room. Super impressed, and they were so kind to me and very welcoming, so that was awesome. So I cut my cash session short to play the bounty tournament, and I won 1 bounty. But anyway, for the cash game, I was in for 3,000, out for 32.22 for a profit of $222. But tomorrow I'm gonna come back and play a long session and get some hours in and some more hands for the vlog. See you tomorrow. Alright, I just pulled into Texas Card House for round 2. Yesterday my table was super like pro heavy and just not a good table. My opinion on it is I want to play against players who are not as good as me, who I can easily get chips from, and yesterday the lineup was pretty tough, so today I'm gonna try and see if I can find a better table. So anyway, here we go.
So the very first hand of this table is gonna be a $15 double board PLO bomb pot. I'm not gonna go into any details on the bomb pots because I simply don't have much to offer as far as strategy goes in these. So in this hand, I flopped the bottom end of a straight with a jack high flush draw on the top board, but I turned the nut straight on the bottom board. I ended up chopping against ace king of spades on the top board. Would have been super cool to scoop, but on the first PLO bomb pot of the day, we chop it up. In this hand, I thought it was a perfect time to start implementing the things I've been learning from Advanced Poker Training's hottest course, Poker Without Fear. Poker Without Fear is all about teaching low to mid-stakes players how to become the bully and start to be the one that's feared at the table. One of the concepts that they implemented that was going through my brain in this hand is a lot of players limp pre-flop wanting to see a flop. They can't stand the thought of, well, what if I would have hit the flop? So they call pretty much any size pre-flop to see if they hit. So in this hand, there's an early position limp and the small blind limps, and I looked down at Queen 10 offsuit. I thought this was a perfect time to start implementing what I've been learning. I raised to $30. By the way, if you guys want to check out the Advanced Poker Training Poker Without Fear course with Steve Blay and Alex Fitzgerald, one of the best mid to low stakes coaches in the entire world, there's a link in my description and a link on the screen right now. If you guys use my link, you get a massive discount on this course, and I highly recommend this if you're a struggling low to mid stakes player or if you feel like you have a lot of leaks. I promise you, I have actually learned a ton by going through this course, and I'm really excited to share it with you. So the flop comes Queen 6-4 Rainbow. This is actually a pretty good flop considering we flop top pair. I bet $40 and only the early position player calls. The turn is a 5, bringing a potential straight. Because this isn't a great card for my range and it's better for my opponents, I'm going to go into check call mode as my hand is now a great hand to bluff catch. I check and he bets $75. I make the call, so we head to our river, which is an offsuit 7. I check, hoping he'll check back and we can get to showdown, and that's exactly what happens. I flip over my Queen 10 off and he mucks. Perfect example of how to implement this strategy where if I would have just checked and saw the flop, I wouldn't have won nearly as much on the hand. I can't recommend Poker Without Fear enough. I promise you will learn so many valuable things, and it'll definitely take your game to the next level. In this hand, a player had moved from a different table to ours, and he brought a lot of chips to the table, so now I was able to top up and add on another 1,000, so now I have about $2,200 in front of me. Under the gun limps the cutoff, and I look down at the beautiful Queen 10 of hearts on the button, and I raised to $25. The original limper and the cutoff call, so we go 3 ways to a flop of Jack 10 8 with 2 diamonds. They check it over to me, and I'm kind of right in the middle of my range. I don't have a very strong hand, but I do have an okay hand, so I think this is fine to check. There's a ton of draws available. I'm not going to get rid of any flush draws, so I don't really see the point in betting. The turn is a huge blank, it's the 4 of hearts. They check it over to me yet again, and now I think any jacks would have started betting, or any strong hand at this point, so I'm pretty confident I have the best hand, and now we can start denying equity and getting value from worse, so I bet $30. Only the big blind calls, so we head to a river, which is the king of clubs. Again, our hand is good and not great. The big blind checks it over to us. I don't see how we can get value from worse. So I check and he shows 6-8 offsuit. So I don't think we are getting much value out of this hand anyway, but luckily for us, we scoop another pot. In this hand, the $25 straddle is on, there's one caller in middle position, and I look down at 5-4 of hearts in the cutoff, and I'm gonna raise this one up. Let's play a pot in position and try to attack this dead money. I make it $110. Fortunately for us, we don't have to go to the streets with our 5 high because they all fold, and we pick up a decent amount of big blinds with 5 high. In this hand, there's a straddle of $25 under the gun, one caller in early position, and I look down at ace-king offsuit in the cutoff and I raise to 100. Only the straddler calls, so we go heads up to a flop of 10-10-8 with 2 spades. He checks, and on this board, I'm gonna go for a down bet and make it $80. He calls. The turn is the queen of clubs, bringing a double flush draw. He checks again. I definitely considered firing here. I think I would have to go a bit on the larger side, but this is a very dynamic card, so I decided to check, thinking that my ace-king high could be good here a lot of the time. So we head to a river, which is an offsuit 8, so now the board is double paired. He fires into me for $125. Both flush draws miss. There are some missed straight draws out there. For this price, I think we're good here, enough that's time to make the call, so I look him up, and he flips over ace-jack, so we're gonna chop this one up. In this hand, I get a little bit tricky when there's an early position limp. The button raises to 25, who is an older gentleman who seems to play pretty snug and straightforward. I look down at ace queen of hearts in the small blind, and while I can certainly raise here, I think it's nice to mix it up every once in a while and balance out your ranges, so I decide to flat. The limper calls as well, so we're going 3 ways to a flop of 10, 8, 6 with 1 heart. We check it over the button and he bets $40. I decide to make the call with my ace high and my backdoor hearts. The other player folds, so we head to a turn card, which is the 4 of diamonds. It brings in the flush, and it's another card that should not favor my opponent's range. I think my opponent is going to check back a ton of the time on this card, so let's make it tough on him. I decide to turn my hand into a bluff and I bet $125. He does indeed fold pretty fast, so we get another one through here. In this hand, there was a limp under the gun, and I'm next to act with ace-king offsuit. I raise to $40. Middle position, then 3 bets to $125. It folds back around to me, and I definitely can 4-bet here, but this time I decided to flat. This hand is eating me alive because I feel like there's a lot of different ways I could have played this hand, but in this case, I decide to flat out of position and we take it to the streets. The flop is ace 4-8 with all hearts. I check and my opponent checks back. The turn is the 3 of diamonds. I have to think my hand is good here a lot of the time, and I do want to start denying equity from heart draws, worse aces, or smaller pocket pairs. I bet $115 and he makes the call. The river is just a terrible, terrible card. It's the 9 of hearts, so now there's 4 to a flush out there. I check, although later reviewing this hand with one of my poker coaches, he said a block bet would have been nice, and honestly, I need to start implementing block bets a little bit more into my strategy. So when I check, he then wants to put a bet together of $150. I have to decide what hands check this flop, call my turn bet, and then value bet the river or bluff the river. I was kind of indifferent, although in theory I think I should be hero calling here, but in practice players just don't bluff enough, and he could definitely be going for value with a high heart in his hand like a king, queen, or jack, maybe even a 10 of hearts. I did decide to lay it down, and unfortunately I didn't get to see my opponent's hand, but I'm gonna let this one go and move on to the next hand. So wrapping up my first 2 days here at TCH Dallas, I racked up my chips and headed to the cashier. I was in the game for $2,300 and I cashed out with $2,880 for a profit of $580 after about 5.5 hours of play. The day before, I had a $222 profit after 2 hours of play for a vlog grand total of $802 in profit. And if you're wondering what I use to track my stats, I use Poker Analytics. It's an amazing, intuitive, clean app that's very easy to use but also can give you very detailed results. If you want to download it, use the link in my description.
Alright, well, I'm here to give you guys real raw sessions, no elaborated hand histories, just sometimes it's kind of boring. And to be honest, tonight the bomb pots were kind of the savior of the session, so kind of interesting. But I was in the game for $2,300 and cashed out with $2,880 for a profit of $580. So a nice little upswing there, a slow and steady grind today. Didn't get involved in too many interesting hands though, but thanks for sticking around, guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed the vlog. If you did, would you do me a huge favor and go all in and like, comment, and subscribe? It would mean the world to me. Just getting started out here in Dallas, it's only up from here. I'll see you guys next time.
I am super excited to announce that I'm going to be on TCH Live Wednesday, September 7th, 6 p.m. We're going to be doing a ladies live stream. I heard it's going to be some mixed games and no limit hold'em, so make sure you check it out. I'll put the YouTube link in my description, put that alert bell on, and make sure you're ready to watch the stream.